Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a cool review for you from the brand Mercer. Now, a little bit about the brand. They were actually founded back in 2014. They're out of New Jersey in the good old US of A. Essentially, of course, being a US-based microbrand, they definitely focus on that high spec, high value, kind of very stylish entry-level watch range. So a lot of their watches are very reasonably priced and also do tend to pack a lot of bang per buck. Now, this particular type of watch I would consider a traveler's watch, and some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for a traveler's watch. Of course, you're going to want that kind of GMT world timer functionality, so you can just go ahead and track multiple time zones with relative ease. Also, I'd say this falls under as a pilot's watch, which also can be a type of traveler's watch, and some key common characteristics and design language for a pilot's watch would be basically a very good balance of legibility and functionality, which I think this watch definitely does. Now, this particular model is called the Nomad GMT, and what you're seeing here is actually a prototype. So this isn't the production model. The production model is coming soon, but I did want to get you guys a review here just to kind of get an idea of the proof of concept and also point out some of the things that are going to be different in the production model versus what you've seen thus far from the prototypes. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look. Okay, so as you can see, definitely the aesthetic is quite reminiscent to the Rolex GMT. The Rolex Explorer 2, especially in that polar setup with the orange accents. But there are quite a few watches right now that have been, I would say, getting away with doing low-key homages. And I think one of them is Bell & Ross, and they do homages, very simple, really distilled takes on things, and they do really well with them, and I think they do get away with a lot and have a lot more fun than other brands can get away with, just because it's kind of part of their DNA. Also, Christopher Ward has done an homage to the Explorer 2, but here you're seeing a model that actually offers a white dial, which I think is really great, and also isn't something that is readily available when it comes to Explorer 2 homage watches. And of course, this isn't a direct homage. It definitely pays tribute to, of course, the functionality and then the type of watch, and even roughly in its dimensions and its color scheme, essentially, and the color play that's involved, but there's definitely a lot more to this, and they definitely taken their own liberties on certain things, and I think what they've come up with is a very nice minimal kind of distillation of what you would expect from this type of kind of traveler's adventure watch. Now, the Nomad GMT is essentially, an adventure watch that's ready for a hike or a snorkel. So that means, of course, you're going to get that whole air, land, and sea vibe, which is really great and especially useful when you are traveling, because you never know what type of activities you're going to be doing. So it's definitely nice to have that. Now, as far as some kind of key changes, as far when you're looking at this model here versus what you're going to see on the production units, on this prototype, some of the changes are going to be, there's actually going to be longer hands, so you'll see the hands here do come up just shy of probably where you might want them, where you actually have to hold it at an angle to kind of line it up while you're setting the time. They're going to be extended, and I believe the renders actually show the hands extended. Now, they're also going to improve the end links, so as you can see here, they're not perfect, but they're definitely functional for this particular prototype and do give you a good idea of what they're going to look like. And then there's also going to be a refined bracelet and clasp. So essentially here it's a bit sharper, not quite as nicely finished as you might expect, but the production units will be. And then of course also you're going to notice a bit of wonky fitment here on this particular clasp, which is a really nice kind of representation of the glide lock clasp, even in the functionality. So of course my gloves are gonna stop me from popping that open very quick, but what you'll see is a very nice I'd say copy essentially of that style. Everything fitting together quite nicely, and with an actual functional extension there, which is great. So I believe it was right about here for my 7 1/4 inch wrist. But yeah, so essentially this particular one, when you're looking at it, it's more of the concept. It's not going to be the exact finished product. I do look forward to seeing what the finished product is going to look like, because I'm actually pretty impressed with just this model right here in my hand. Although I know this is kind of just a rough, almost an outline of what you guys will receive when you actually purchase this. Now, as far as the retail price go, these actually go for $7.99, and that's direct from Mercer. A little bit about the case size and whatnot. Of course, this is a 41 millimeter diameter watch with an 11 millimeter height, and this is made out of full 316L stainless steel. It is brushed with high polished bevels there, as you can see. Really nicely done. And you know, it's nice that they actually went pretty original on the kind of the case form and whatnot, and the shape. They didn't try to make this a one-to-one copy or anything like that. Even the proportions as far as the bezel go and the dial layout, it's definitely a different feel and a different take that I think lends it to being quite just versatile overall. Now, the crystal is a flat sapphire with anti-reflective coating. So the nice thing is, as you can see here, it is going to be quite reflective. But when you actually take a look at it, you can straight on there without the hot studio lights casting too much reflection. It almost looks like you can just reach out into the dial and just touch it, because that is how clear it is. So very nice clarity there. You're not going to see any hints of any other hued colors that you're not supposed to see without the reflection on there. So I think that's really nice. Now, as far as the bezel go, it is a fixed bezel, which does have that great 24-hour scale there. And you know, it has a nice kind of a sunburst finish to it there, where the brushing, it goes all the way around instead of circling around. It would be, imagine a sunburst dial and then everything being spread out. So it has that really cool radial brush to it, which I can definitely appreciate. The crown is a screw down crown, which helps it get that 100 meters of water resistance. The crown is polished and signed with no crown guards, which gives it a nice, versatile, clean look, and you know, adds a little bit of, I'd say, kind of a classic look to it versus having some big old crown guards on there. Now, the movement is very interesting. They actually are using the Swiss-made automatic Soprod C125. Now, although you can't see that movement here, well, you do look at this really nicely done, embossed solid case back. The movement is actually, it's, you know, automatic Soprod movements that actually has a GMT module built into it. So, of course, if you don't know much about the Soprod A10, that is essentially kind of a reworked Seiko Creedor movement from the 4L line, which eventually became from the 4L25 to the 4L75, and now has just kind of been rebirthed into Seiko Presage as the 6L35. So a really cool movement. The fact that it's kind of was made to be the Japanese equivalent of the 2893 without actually being a copy of it or a clone of it is actually, I think, pretty cool. And then you kind of add to that it has Japanese design essentially, but with Swiss craftsmanship. So you can't really argue with that. And it's really interesting to see that movement in this particular watch because, of course, from a manufacturing standpoint, the smaller batches you buy, the more expensive things are. So that's honestly why you know, ETA-based movements are you're going to see them so widely used, is because they produce so many they can sell them for a cheaper price, because from a manufacturing standpoint the cost is lower, so they can basically sell them for less and still make a profit. It gets more and more tough when you have a movement that you're only going to be making in low volume, because that means each unit is going to be more expensive to make, meaning it's going to be more expensive to sell. So I think it's really cool because these types types of movements, and the soap rod movements generally are in more expensive watches. So it's nice to see that in a quite affordable, just under $800, you can actually get a GMT soap rod movement in here, which I think is really, really great. Now, of course, this does have an independent GMT hand, which is going to be pretty comparable to what you'd see from like a 2893 movement, essentially, where you're going to be able to set that hand versus independently setting the hour hand. Essentially, when you do the hour hand, you're going to set that by moving along the minute hand, in a full rotation, so that essentially it will actually move that along. Versus here, at the second crown position, you can set your date in one direction, and then you set your essentially the GMT hand with the other direction. A little about this movement. Of course, it's 4 hertz, so it's going to be 8 ticks per second. It has a 42-hour power reserve, and it is actually quite thin, which do lend itself to this particular model. Now the dial, you do have these really nice brushed raised indices there that I think look really quite nice. A matte white dial, you have the date at 6 o'clock, so there's not much to complain about from that standpoint. I think that's something that a lot of people asked for, and Mercer really listened. Now as far as the lume goes, it is BGW9, which is great. And then water resistance, like I mentioned earlier, 100 meters or 330 feet. You do have 20 millimeter lugs. And then you have this, as far as the bracelet goes, really nice taper. Starts at 20, goes down to 16 millimeters at the link, and then to an 18 millimeter clasp there, fully milled. And of course, that kind of glide lock style ratcheting clasp. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get this on the wrist. All right, now as you can see on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, even if I add a little bit more arm in there, it definitely has a nice bold wear to it. Full sized, of course, I wouldn't say oversized, but the 41 millimeter diameter definitely fills the wrist really nicely. Quite flat, with a nice slight downturn on the lugs there. And then you can see with the T-shaped lug, it does kind of extend that lug to lug length just a hair, versus if it had a female end link there. But as far as the way it rides on the wrist, really nice. Of course, what you can expect from this type of bracelet if you've ever worn anything that has an oyster style bracelet with a glide lock clasp. Really great as far as articulation goes, comfort, and this white dial, it's a nice, a little bit more of a true white versus being a cream, so it's going to make that very, very versatile, and pretty much something you can pretty much wear in any occasion. And the nice thing about this white dial is, of course, it's going to make this thing, especially considering it does have a very easy lug width there, it's going to make it pretty much a strap monster. I mean, you can imagine it with some, a really nice leather strap there. As you can see, that's going to look really good. Of course, from friend of the channel, Rich Candy Watch Club. So you can see that would look really good. And then, of course, another Rich Candy Watch Club strap. Boom, you can see that on a NATO, that would really look quite outstanding, especially with that orange accent there, and then the black and gray definitely suits it. So there's definitely a lot of options when it comes to this piece. I think it's really versatile. It could be a very, really a strap monster, and then you're going to get that really nice functionality there by having essentially a GMT movement, and then you're going to be able to track multiple time zones because you do have the bezel there, which gives you a little quick reference to the 24-hour scale of your second time zone. Some people will set that to be their home and basically use this thing as an AM PM indicator when they are set to local time on the main handset, and some people will use that to be a secondary timer. So for me, I like to use the main handset for my local time and then use the GMT hand. Normally, when I'm just in the US and not traveling, I just set it to East Coast time, just so I can have an idea, because I do for work, and then also, and even in YouTube, I do deal with people in the East Coast, so it's nice to kind of be cognizant of what time it is over there because, of course, I'm stationed out of California. So, I'm pretty much, in comparison, I'm coming into work much later and staying also much later. So if I have something going on in the afternoon, it's nice to be able to take a look there and see how late it is, if it's supper time or whatnot in the East Coast before I pick up the phone or shoot out an email. So again, really nicely on the wrist there. Really cool, especially considering that this is just a prototype. Very, very impressed with the wear and, of course, the overall design aesthetic. But let's go ahead and move into some Lume shots and low light transition. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, that BGW9 is shining really, really brightly, especially with a little bit of reflection off of that white dial. Super crisp, extremely legible. You don't have any lume on that seconds hand, so of course I don't think you should be using this as a dive watch. So you're not going to know if it's live unless you're really paying attention to when the hand sweeps over any of the lumed hands there. But what I do like to do during these low light shots is actually do a low light transition within the Lume shot there, so you can get a little bit of an idea of what this watch is going to look like, in other situations apart from direct sunlight. So when you're coming out of a building and whatnot, in and out of a vehicle, you're actually going to probably be looking at this watch in much different lighting than if you were just standing in the middle of a park on a well-lit day. So really, you can see the way that Lume is transitioning. Really beautiful, especially considering that this is just a prototype, and typically that's something that brands don't spend too much time on when they're doing their prototypes. Normally, I find myself kind of having to make excuses for why the Lume doesn't look great when it comes to a prototype. So it's really nice and refreshing to see the prototype there with really nice Lume. And then the good thing about that is, of course, you can expect that the production model will be either just as nice, if not nicer. So you can see that nice transition. It just disappears there. You can see the white on the dial is much more white and less creamy. Nice matte finish. And you're also looking at the finishing, although they did mention already that the finishing is going to be a bit refined and whatnot. You can see that generally the brushing and whatnot is quite uniform as the light plays and rolls right over it. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get into some closing thoughts. Now, as far as model variants go, this is also available in a black dial, which definitely is going to be something that many will find more versatile, but I think has just a little bit less pizzazz and personality. Now on the wrist, of course, extremely versatile, like I mentioned. I've probably said that word so many times. Of course, it does have that sporty Rolex-inspired aesthetic, which I think, it does really well. It accomplishes that look. Now, as far as comparable models go, Bell & Ross does have some vintage GMT style watches, but they retail for around $3,900. That's really that's a lot. So especially considering the movement and the overall fit and finish and whatnot. Not that it's bad, but I mean, for that type of money, it's just you kind of have to expect more. Probably a closer competitor would be something like the Christopher Ward C65 Trident GMT, but those retail for about $1,095, so right around just under $1,100. So that's still a pretty big gap on there. And neither of those models have white dial options for this, so they're definitely going to still have that look with the orange accents and whatnot, but it's going to be more traditional kind of black, orange, and steel look. Versus here you do get that nice kind of polar vibe, which is, I think really, really great and quite versatile. I'd say, bottom line, why let Bell & Ross have all of the fun? White dialed sports watches are some of the most versatile everyday options on the market. I mean, if you think about it, the white Oyster Perpetual 39, it's just so well loved right now. I personally have a bit of a watch crush on it. And then, of course, the Explorer the Polar Explorer 2s, even the previous models and the newer generations. There's definitely just a lot to love with that particular aesthetic. It's something that looks good, and from an aviation standpoint to, you know, even a motorsports style. You know, you could throw a rally strap on this. I think it would look great. You already saw that with that, you know, that particular tone, leather tone there, that I pictured earlier, that it's gonna pick up those nice orange highlights and whatnot really well. So, you know, as popular as white dial sports watches are, you know, for everyday, you know, kind of that everyday range, I think the Mercer Nomad GMT is really looking ready to join the fray and be an option, be an alternative to, you know, a lot of the options that are out there, because of the fact that, one, it has the great BGW9 Lume. It also has, as a bonus, it does have, you know, the GMT functionality, and then you're going to get the glide lock style clasp. You know, everything, of course, solid. You're not going to get any push pins. You're getting screw pins, solid links, solid end links, nice fake case finishing, raised indices, painted hands. You're going to get that really cool, quirky, unique Swiss movement. So there's just a lot to offer. So I'm really surprised. This one caught me a little bit off guard when Mercer announced this one, just because it's just such a departure, I say, from a lot of what they're offering. And what they're offering isn't bad by any means, but I think this just really takes it up a notch. Like, they were on a mission to offer something and really fill a space in the market. So with all that said, if you like the video, please do a like, and if not already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments below. All right, guys, thanks.